It's me, I'm back again. So I've been hiking the trails in Connecticut and taking some time to process some of the things that happened on the trail. They were pretty serious, and I did want to come back and share them with people, especially women planning to hike on the trail. I know there are a lot of female YouTubers out there who are paid to tell you it is a dream and everything's romantic and there's trail magic and you're in a Tramily and it's so happy and you're so safe all the time. But they're literally selling a dream. A lot of them are sponsored. A lot of them, and they admitted to me off camera, it ain't that dreamy. So I want to tell you how it really is, because I want you to be safe out there. I was not, because I didn't know this ahead of time, and if I had, I would have prepared completely differently. So I think it's really important. So I'm going to tell you the whole dream they're selling, and I'm going to tell you what it really is. And you've probably never heard this anywhere else from anyone before. So the first thing, and this all matters, and it matters, it'll culminate to the end where I get to what happened with the men, but I'll probably actually do a separate video going through the details of what happened and how it could have been prevented and I think that's the important part, is I've been considering what I could have done to have better control over the situation had I known ahead of time it was going to happen. So that's the goal of this. So the first thing I want to tell you is start with the easy stuff. YouTubers, especially I'm talking about female YouTubers now because I'm talking about female solo hikers, they're the ones telling us it's safe. So when a female YouTuber tells you it's safe, well, here's the other things you shouldn't believe so that you'll know it all kind of adds up. Trail magic, first of all, trail magic is not real. Trail magic is an illusion. Trail magic is actually very rare, and it's very difficult to line yourself up with it. It does happen. I hit it once. It was my own hostel that was waiting for me, so it's kind of like not really. But trail magic is, people will put in far out, hey, we're going to do trail magic at this location on this date, and if you happen to be there, stop in, right? And people will kind of speed up or slow down a little to try to hit that trail magic, perfectly fine. YouTubers with paid, or who get money off people subscribing to them, I actually heard multiple YouTubers doing this. One had hiked 5 miles past that trail magic because it was going to happen the next day. She hiked to a shelter and the next morning hiked 5 miles back down to the location, backed up, and then filmed coming into it like she just arrived. And really, she had to do an extra 10 miles to get it. I don't care that you're doing that, but just know this is part of how they're creating an illusion, and it's not entirely real. I saw another YouTuber who is days ahead of the trail magic, arranged for a shuttle to bring her back. She walked through, spent an hour there, and then the shuttle driver brought her back again. And then they're saying, oh, we're bumping into trail magic. It's an illusion that was arranged. It was a lot of planning went into that. So just know you're not going to bump into it all the time. It's actually pretty rare, and you have to get pretty lucky to hit it. So these things, again, I don't care. That's not going to affect your safety at all, but it lets you know what they're doing and that they're tricking you. And I want you to know you're being tricked so that when I get to the important stuff, you believe me. The other thing that they will do, you'll never hear a YouTuber, male or female, say to you, when you're in the bubble, you're about 1 woman for every 10 men. And when you get outside that bubble, and as people start dropping off the trail, it's more like 1 woman for every 15 men, and sometimes even less women than that. And it got to the point when I was in Virginia hiking south, when I was hiking and seeing other women and they were seeing me, it was a big, oh my gosh, another woman, and everyone was doing this. You stayed in shelters or campsites. There was only like every 3rd night that there was a woman there. So a lot of times you're spending your time alone with men. And as I went into before, it just creates a really bad situation when you have 5, 8, 10 men and you're the only woman and these guys won't leave you alone. Especially the section hikers, they were the worst. But just know ahead of time, they're not mentioning that all, but then they're telling you, you'll be safe out there. But just so you know, you're going to be the only woman most of the time. It's not coming up because that's not part of the romantic vision. So know that ahead of time, and that's really important. And shame on anyone for not mentioning that and then telling you you'll be safe, especially women. Sisterhood, you should be telling us this stuff. The next thing is, here's another one, logistics. Everyone I met, when you're inside the bubble, planning out hostels and shuttles and everything else, it's like being in a beehive with everyone trying to book this stuff and fight for the same resources all the time. It's anxiety. It's very difficult. I actually couldn't do it. I had times, and other people did as well, where you just couldn't get off trail to get resupply. And I'm sure people dropped off and left, but I actually redirected. Now, when I redirected and didn't have to compete for anything, I was still surprised to find it's still really stressful to plan out your logistics. So you're not only planning out your next hostel, like 3 days from now, I'm going to do this many miles, the weather all looks good, the terrain seems okay. But then you get on and you find out the terrain's really difficult and you actually take longer to get places, and the next day you're tired and you have to adjust your miles and this stuff's happening and you have to keep your hostel date. So it's a stress making sure you hit that mark every day. And you're also planning the next hostel, because when you arrive at this hostel, you need to know when you go to the grocery store how many days and nights of food you need to make it to the next stop. So you're always kind of planning 2 steps out. And it is a lot, because every night after you're exhausted from hiking and you've set up your tent and you've cooked your food and you get inside, the first thing you do is kind of take out your phone and start going through the maps and the far out and the AWOL to figure out, am I still on my mark and where am I going next? And you start looking at campsites that you thought you were going to stop at, and do they really have water supplies, and how good is the shelter, and are there any issues there? There's a lot to do all the time. You spend about half hour to an hour every night just going over the logistics of that. And every time I got to a hostel or a location with other hikers and the logistics came up, every single person said it is the most anxiety-ridden nightmare they've ever had to do. And I even talked to people who had been hiking. When I went south, I was hiking into the January, February starters who had been doing this for months and had gone 800, 900 miles and were saying it was still awful. You never settle into it. It never gets easy. It's always trying to find people and meet you at this spot, and can they get you to that spot, and what's the resupply? And then 3 days later, you're doing it all again. And it is a never-ending nightmare, and it's more complicated than you think it is, especially if you're a solo hiker, because it's just you helping you. If you start the trail with a friend or two, you have a couple eyes looking over it. There were sometimes it got so difficult, I actually called home to my husband and got his eyes on it, and he booked some of the hostels for me because it was easier for him to do without having to write down phone numbers and get a hold of it. So if you hike the trail and start with another person, you're going to have a way easier time of it than if you start solo and have to learn this all on your own and always have to do it on your own. So when you see YouTubers going into town, going, I'm so excited, I'm going into town, just know 2 days prior they were crying over their phone. And that is the absolute truth. It's not an exaggeration. I saw people who were working on their Triple Crown crying over their phone and saying it's the worst part of through hiking is the logistics. And somebody asked one of them, why don't you do a video on that? And they said, that's not the dream. And so they're not telling you that it's so difficult and it's so stressful and it never stops, and every couple days you're doing this and every night you're doing this, and it's just never ending. And if you don't do it, you don't get more food. So they're selling a dream when they're like, it's so exciting. Just know they've been stressing for days to get to these so exciting. A lot of times too, when they film stops off trail, I saw those stops and they were walking like 1.5 miles to a Subway and then 1.5 miles back to get the footage of them eating at a Subway. I'm doing a 20-mile day. I don't want to hike 23 miles just to get a sandwich, but they were doing that stuff. So kudos to them, but just know the Subway sandwiches a lot of times are not part of the dream. They're part of a lot of extra miles they're not telling you about, or shuttles to places that they're also arranging to get that footage. So it's not as many wonderful food spots as you think they are, and that's also part of the illusion, okay? The next illusion that I actually think is part of the problem is you're told it's okay to be a solo female hiker, when then you're going to hook up with a Tramily real quick, and you're going to have people who care about you, and you're going to stick together, and you're not going to be alone at all. And I will tell you, after 3 weeks of hiking all the way through the Smoky Mountains, it was a constant conversation that came up in campsites and hotels and hostels is, does anybody know a Tramily? And everybody said no, with the exception of one group of people who, it was funny that everyone came to the table. At different times you meet these people and go, oh, except for those 4 back in Hiawassee. And we would go, oh, the clique. And everyone would call them the clique. And they were gossipy. They talked about everyone. They didn't want to, if you sat down and talked to them, they would actually turn and look away and put their nose in the air like the mean girls in school or something. I don't know what they were, but everyone called them high schoolers and clique. So it became this joke on the trail that those were the only Tramily anybody knew, with the mean girl clique. So when I went Sobo, when I went to Harper's Ferry down to Glasgow, and I started bumping into January, February, even March starting through hikers, and I asked them, none of them were in Tramilies, they were all solo hikers, the men, the women, and all solos. And I said, are there any Tramilies? And they said, there's cliques. And they said, but not many. And I said, what do you mean by cliques? And they said, there's just groups of people who are resource hoarding. They don't help anyone but themselves. They don't talk to anyone. They don't include you in anything. She goes, they're cliques. One YouTuber said to me, everyone thinks you're in a clique unless you're in the clique, and then you think you're in a Tramily. So there really wasn't a lot of it out there. It is part of the illusion. One thing, I talked to a hiker who had hiked the trail before and was back doing it again. And she said, I hiked the first one in a Tramily, and it was kind of a clique. And she said, it was the most frustrating thing ever. She said, you're never hiking your own hike. Every day you're doing the miles that everybody else wants to do. You're stopping whenever you want to keep going. They want to go into town, you go into town. She said, it's actually very frustrating. And she only recommended it if you're a very beginning hiker and you're a type B personality who will just always go with the group and you never get frustrated about compromise, then that is for you. But if you're a type A personality or you have goals of hiking, you will not be happy in a Tramily. So they don't exist very often. And I said, well, I find that every time I really like somebody, we don't move at the same pace. And like every time I go, this is a really great person, they're either hiking 5 miles faster than me a day, or they're 10 miles behind me, and I never matched up with the people I really liked. And you think that's going to happen very often. You're going to meet a lot of people you like, but it's like going to Walmart. There's a lot of good people there, but do you want to hike every day with all the people? And they're looking at me the same way. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying every kind of person is out there, and not all of them are your people. In fact, most of them are not. They're not people you want to spend every day with. So trying to line up and find somebody who you like and who hikes at the exact same pace as you and who wants to stop or go as often as you, you're going to be compromising, and it's not going to be easy. And most people actually don't do it. So when they tell you female solo hikers, you're going to be fine, you're going to be in a Tramily, probably not. Probably not. So that takes the whole safety issue off the table. As soon as I realized I'm going to be alone all the time, and as soon as the women started dropping off and spreading out, and it was all men and me, and now I'm thinking, this isn't so safe anymore. And the behavior of the men was getting worse and worse and worse as it. And in a separate video, I'm going to go over like incidents that actually happened and tell you. But I just want you to know, when YouTubers are telling you, hey, it's safe and you can go out there as a woman and be solo hiking, know that they're creating an illusion for you that includes trail magic and Tramilies, and they won't tell you there's hardly any women out here, and towns are exciting and so much fun, and it's absolutely safe. This is the dream. It's not the reality. And it's really important that you know you are going to run into situations where there are men around, and it's all men, and some of them are going to get obnoxious, and they're going to you don't even have a voice. When you say to them, hey, I don't want to talk to you, I'm busy, I have things to do, they pretend they don't even hear you, they don't acknowledge it, and they even get closer and they keep talking, and you can see them going, what are you going to, you can see that gear turning. Women, you know what I'm talking about, where it goes, what are you going to do about it? You're alone in the woods. I'm going to keep talking, and you're going to listen. And this is what they do. And every woman I talked to had trouble with men. Every single woman had trouble with men. In the bubble, I had trouble with men, but it was a different type. It was a creepy type of trouble, but they didn't get too out of hand because there's too many people around, and I will talk about that. But when you start getting solo out there where you're in the middle of the wilderness and it's only men at camps and nobody's watching them, they get worse and worse. And I went online after and checked out articles about how safe it really is. And the only thing I could find is the Appalachian Trail is safe because in comparison to the real world where it's, one crime in every 100,000, on the trail you only have 2,000 people. So the odds of it's not true. That just doesn't relate, because the issue is society is watching out here. Every day you go to the grocery store, there's other people at the grocery store. If somebody gets in your face, somebody else is watching with their camera, right? And ready to hit the 911. When you're in the middle of the woods and some guy keeps stepping in your space and giving you trouble, and you can't do anything about it, they know no one is there. They know you're 8 miles in the middle of the woods. By the time anyone even got there, it would be too late. And they know this. And the trouble is their buddies are kind of punching them on the side going, yeah. And you're like, okay, if I get in trouble, these guys aren't going to help either. These other campers aren't. They're all men. They're all going to pretend they slept through it. And you really get this feeling the further you go out and the more you're dealing with the men. I will say most of those men were section hikers who were out for the week with their buddies and do this once or twice a year, every year. They know right what they're doing. They know right what they're up to. They're there for trouble, and you're on their target. And it was more them than thru hikers. I didn't have trouble with other thru hikers once I was outside the bubble. So in the bubble, yes, had trouble with men in the bubble, but the group society, trail society, kept them in check. When you're outside of the bubble and there's no one around to monitor that behavior, no one they have to answer to, no one that's going to see, men were behaving really badly. Now, I'm not saying all men, and I'm saying it was mostly section hikers, but it was enough that it happened every day. Like every day you'd get to camp and I would call my husband on my cell phone, because 90% of the time, 95% of the time, you have cell phone coverage and you can call home. So I would call home and I would say, oh my gosh, I'm coming into the shelter and there are 8 men here and there are no women here. And this is going to be a really bad night. And it would be. And other nights there's 3 men here. There's 3 men here. Oh gosh, there's no women. And then the third night you're like, oh my gosh, there's a woman here. And we would just hang out together, because as soon as you're talking to another woman, if any men come over, you just kind of ghost them, ignore them, and they go away. And I talked to hikers who were hiking together, like best friend women or mother and daughter women, and they said they really didn't have much trouble from men for that reason, because whenever the men started heckling one of them, the other would sit down and they would talk and they would just kind of ignore them and they would go away. So hiking with a partner is the way to go when you do the Appalachian Trail, women. I know you could do it alone, but if you're going to do it alone, you do need to consider your personal safety. And the way for doing that is the pepper spray that all the hikers will say, throw out your pepper spray. You don't need any pepper spray. Everybody's really friendly. I didn't bring my pepper spray. I wish I had. And honestly, I told hubby, I wouldn't even carry the weight of the spray. I would want to empty that thing out, because you're never going to need it. But having that hot pink container there, where if any man came over and got in your face and was talking, where you could just pull this out and go, well, you could first say, I want you to back away and give me some space. I'm not interested in any of this. And they just kept talking. You could just pull that out and go, I'm going to say this again. And they would go, oh, you don't have to get, it happens here in Connecticut on the trails. So I know as soon as you pull out that pepper spray, you don't ever have to deploy it. And you have to actually be really careful deploying it. I'll talk about that in a second. But you don't ever have to deploy it. Just pulling it out is enough to make them go, whoa, lady, you're crazy, and back up. And they're not going to mess with you anymore, because now they know you have it. So keep it in sight and do have it. And don't listen to any of the solo women YouTuber thru hikers telling you you don't need pepper spray. It really does help, and it's for a visual reason, to tell people, I have this and I'm not afraid to use it. So I will say there were a lot of women with pepper spray who had no clue about pepper spray. Learn how to use it first. Some women were saying, if anyone tries to get in my tent at night, I'm going to spray them. I'm like, you are going to spray yourself in your tent. What are you talking about? You can't deploy pepper spray in your tent. You can't do it in a shelter without getting yourself and everybody else. The pepper spray, really, the only place you could use that is on a trail, like an open trail. You need to learn how to shoot your spray. So that's why I'm saying I don't think you would ever have to deploy it. I think just having it, if you needed it, would be enough to tell them, I mean what I say. Oh, no, I hear you. It's kind of a thing. So don't go spraying your pepper spray in your tent. The other thing is, I never was afraid anyone would come in the tent. Even the last night there, where I had men bothering me inside of my tent, and I'll go through that in a separate video. I always thought to myself, and I had my husband on the phone, I don't think they're going to come in this tent. I think they're just trying to intimidate me in my tent, but they're never going to come in here. But just in case, here's my knife and here's my SOS button, and my husband is on text and we're texting each other. So, but I'll go into that in a separate one. But it's just really important that you do have that pepper spray with you. It's really, you don't want a knife. You got to get really close to use a knife. The pepper spray keeps you back away from somebody and say, I mean what I'm saying, listen to my words. So bring your pepper spray. I'm also going to go in another video, I'll go into the different incidents and I'll go to what happened. And then I'll tell you, after coming back and thinking about it, what would have been a better way to handle that situation. Because the trouble is, ladies, listen to this. After you've hiked whatever miles you've hiked, you're tired. I don't care if you're hiking 5 miles or 10 miles or 20 miles, whatever your max mile is, at the end of the day, you're tired. And you get to camp and you pitch your tent and you hang your bear cable up and you cook your meal and you clean your dishes and you wash your underwear. And then you're all done and you get in your tent and you spend a half hour on your far out and you go to bed and you're wiped out. So in between there, when a man comes in and start heckling you while you're trying to do these things in camp and you can't get them off of you, you're so tired, you're not thinking, oh, you know what I should do right now. You're just thinking, how do I stop this? How do I play this game of psychological chess where I keep them away from me without pissing them off where they want to hurt me? You know, you're just thinking like that. You're in panic mode now, trying to manage a situation. But later when you step back, and as I did, I started talking with my husband and saying, what could I have done in that situation, even though I didn't have pepper spray? How could I have handled that in a way that would have been safer? There were some where pepper spray was the only answer, and I wish I had it. But there were others where now that I've thought about it, I could have handled that in a way that would have been better. And that's what I want to do the other video on, so that you watch and you go, oh, and you at least have that somewhere in there. So when you go out hiking, you have it. Because the other thing is, most women weren't in Tramilies. They were in leapfrog games, is what we all called it, is where you might be around a couple women, but you're seeing each other every day or every 2 days or every 3 days. So some days you're camping together. And there were groups when I was hiking south and I hit the January hikers. There was a group of 3 women who I bumped into separately, who were kind of purposely staying within a day of each other, but didn't always land at the same spot. So there were some nights where they were camping solo and where they ran into trouble with men. And then there were nights where they lined up together and were together. So most women hiked that way. I would suggest you don't. I would suggest you really do time it out. So if you're hiking leapfrog, one of you is always with another at night. Or like I'm going to do, I'm going back in a few years with my husband, because you know, if you're with a man, men aren't going to bother you at all. I said to my husband, I said, you don't even need to do anything. Your being there is going to be enough to make them leave me alone and let me do my hike, because the miles, as difficult as that trail was, it was still the easiest part of everything. Hiking the trail is the easiest part, but it's not easy. So the logistics and the men were just the absolute worst part of that whole trail. And ultimately it was that the men were getting dangerous and saying dangerous things. And the more it went on, the more I said, no, this isn't safe. And I'm only 6 weeks into it and this has gotten this bad. So where's it going? You know, 12 incidents in 5 active weeks of hiking over 6 weeks is too many incidents with men. I wasn't alone. It was a lot of different women. Separate video coming on all the incidents that happened that I think you should know about and how you could handle them, or at least you can at least hear them and think in your own mind, well, no, but I would handle it like this. Would at least give you the power that when that situation happens, and it will, you already know what you're going to do. And that is such a help to you. And the fact that female YouTubers aren't telling you this and preparing you for this, I think is such a terrible disservice to women's safety that I had to speak up about it. So if I've gone on too long, well, then you can always hit the off button. But I wouldn't till I check out that next video, because it's going to be a pretty serious chat. And I hope it helps you all to keep safe out there. So one more thing before I go, I just want to say this. The trail is amazing. The Appalachian Trail is amazing. So don't let this stop you. Let this empower you to do it in a different way. And that's what I'm saying. I did not get off trail because it was too difficult. I loved every minute of hiking the trail, even when it was cold and rainy and I was racing to get to a shelter. I still loved it. I love the views. I love the challenge. I love hiking, starting at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning and hiking till I couldn't hike anymore at 4:30. I never found there was ever a boring day. I loved every bit of the trail, even at the points when you cry it's so difficult. I still loved it. But loving it is not enough. You also have to be safe. So don't let this deter you. Let it empower you. Make sure you have the true information. Make sure you're prepared. You know what you're going to do if, but best of all, start with a hiking partner who can stay with you the whole time. But if you can't, make sure you're prepared for what is to come, and then go out there and enjoy. Because I did a quarter of the trail. I wish I could have stayed on the trail and done more, and it is really upsetting that men are what drove me off the trail. As a woman, I shouldn't have to worry about that. In this country, I should be able to walk freely wherever I want to, but we women know we can't even walk to our cars and be safe. So don't let me stop you. Get out there and do it. I'm going back to do it again. I'm just going to do it in a safer way. The miles, the thrill, the hike, it really was amazing. YouTubers, you don't really need to create the dream. You can say how it really is and will still want to do it. So do it.
Things are scary, cemetery, ready.